My name is Isabella Martinez, and I was 34 years old the morning my family tried to disown me over a prom dress. At 9:07 a.m., I was standing in a glass conference room in downtown Austin, halfway through presenting our Q3 growth strategy, when my phone vibrated across the polished table. The screen lit up with my younger sister's name, Sophia. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. My client paused mid-question. I glanced down. Need $3,200 for prom. Send it today. Boutique appointment at 4. My mouth went dry. $3,200 for one night. For photos she'd filter and post and forget. I forced a tight smile at my team. Excuse me 1 second. Out in the hallway, I stared at the message again, hoping I'd misread it. Nope. I typed back. Absolutely not. Get a part-time job. I hit send and felt something sharp and final settle in my chest. I expected drama, eye-rolling, maybe a sulky voicemail later. Instead, my phone rang within 30 seconds. Sophia. You are unbelievable, she shrieked the second I answered. It's just prom. You make so much money. I leaned against the cool wall. You're 18. Plenty of people work to pay for prom. She laughed, cold, mocking. You don't get it. I deserve this. Everyone already knows I'm getting a custom dress from South Congress. Then everyone's going to be disappointed. Silence. Then you're ruining my life. The call disconnected. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been. Not because of the money, because of the assumption that my bank account existed for her. By lunchtime, the real attack began. My mother's text came first. Pay for your sister's prom, or don't bother calling yourself part of this family. My stomach dropped. Seconds later, my father. Choose wisely, Isabella. Family or selfishness? I reread the messages 3 times. Family or selfishness? As if I hadn't spent the last 4 years quietly wiring them thousands of dollars. Rent assistance, utility bills, emergency repairs, groceries, medical expenses, or so I thought. 4 years ago, at 30, I had opened a joint family account to help them stay afloat. I was working 60-hour weeks, traveling constantly, drowning in deadlines. I trusted them. That was my first mistake. Sophia had grown up in a different universe than I did. When she was born, I was 16, already working after school at Target to buy my own clothes because my parents couldn't afford extras. But somehow, they could afford $400 jeans from Nordstrom, VIP concert tickets, weekend trips to San Antonio, a $2,500 winter-themed 13th birthday party with a professional photographer. I still remember asking for $60 for a school trip to Houston. We can't afford luxuries right now, Isabella, my mother had snapped. 3 weeks later, Sophia got $250 for a concert without hesitation. She was their second chance. I was the rehearsal. My mother, Diana, ran our household like a monarchy. My father, Robert, enforced her decisions with quiet loyalty. Sophia was their golden child. Brilliant simply because she existed. I was the one who had to figure it out, and I did. Community college, 2 jobs, Starbucks mornings, data entry nights. Graduated at 24, junior marketing coordinator, then campaign manager, then major tech accounts. By 29, I was pulling a 6-figure salary. I lived alone in East Austin. No roommates, no strings. Yet somehow, I was still the family ATM. When Sophia's voicemail came through around 1 p.m., she hadn't meant to leave it. I heard her whining in the background. Mom, Dad, Isabella's being impossible. You need to make her pay. My mother's voice floated through faintly. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll handle your sister. This was coordinated. We are serious, Isabella. If you won't support your family, maybe you shouldn't be part of it. My chest tightened. I stepped into the parking garage after work and sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel. For years, I'd sent money without questioning. $1,200 when they said the mortgage was late. $2,500 for medical bills. $800 for a broken AC unit. Always urgent, always desperate. But now they were threatening to erase me from the family over a boutique appointment. Something didn't add up. I opened my banking app, scrolled. Transfer after transfer to the joint account. Thousands upon thousands. I'd never once audited where it went. Because I trusted them. Because I believed being a good daughter meant sacrificing without asking. But Sophia's tone today, the certainty, the expectation, it felt rehearsed, planned. This wasn't about a dress. It was about leverage. My phone buzzed again. Sophia. What? I answered flatly. They already said you'd pay, she snapped. It's your responsibility as my older sister. It's my right. You're right. I actually laughed. You don't have a right to my money. You're so obsessed with money, she shot back. No, I said quietly. I'm obsessed with being respected. She hung up on me. I stared at the concrete wall in front of my car, heart pounding. Family or selfishness? The words echoed. And for the first time in my life, I wondered, what if choosing myself wasn't selfish? What if it was survival? I pulled up the full transaction history on the joint account. My finger hovered over the screen. Something was wrong. I could feel it. And by morning, I was going to find out exactly what. The next day started like my body had swallowed a live wire. I woke up before my alarm, the dark still pressed against my windows, and for a few dazed seconds, I almost reached for my phone the way I always did, half asleep, half trained to brace for whatever emergency my parents claimed was threatening the house, the lights, the family. Then I remembered Sophia's words. It's my right, and my mother's ultimatum. Pay or don't bother calling yourself part of this family. I sat up in bed, heart already racing, and opened the banking app again, as if staring hard enough could make the numbers change into something reasonable. They didn't. If anything, the more I looked, the more the whole thing felt staged. Like they'd decided I was finally due for a harsher kind of pressure. I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone chimed. A notification. Not from my family. From the bank. Wells Fargo. Large transaction alert. Immediate action required. My mug froze halfway to my mouth. For a second, I didn't breathe. I just stared at the subject line, as if it were a threat written in someone else's handwriting. I opened it with shaking fingers. A transfer of $6,500 had been processed that morning. $6,500, withdrawn from the joint family account, sent to an external account I didn't recognize. It wasn't one of my usual monthly transfers. It wasn't something I approved. It was a snatch and run. A cold sweat broke across my back. And suddenly, the prom demand made sense in a way that made me feel sick. They weren't just asking for prom money. They were trying to distract me from the real theft. Or worse, trying to soften the ground so I'd accept it. My hands moved before my mind caught up. I tapped Sophia's name and hit call. She picked up on the third ring, already annoyed. What? What's going on with the family account? I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. There's a $6,500 withdrawal this morning. I didn't approve it. A beat of silence. Then she scoffed like I'd accused her of stealing my lip gloss. I don't know anything about that. Ask Mom and Dad. Sophia. I tightened my grip on the phone. $6,500 doesn't just happen. You're being dramatic, she snapped. It's probably bills or whatever. God, you're so obsessed with money. Obsessed with money. Like I hadn't spent my entire 20s working myself half to death while she posed in new outfits that somehow appeared like magic. I'm not obsessed, I said softly. I'm done being lied to. She laughed, cold and careless. You always do this. You always act like you're better than us. Then the line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the silent screen. The air around me suddenly too thin. She hadn't sounded confused. She'd sounded trained, like she'd been coached on exactly what to say. I tried my mother next, straight to voicemail. I texted my father. Dad, there's a $6,500 withdrawal from the joint account. What is it? No answer. The silence hit harder than any insult, because it told me everything. They weren't rushing to explain. They were waiting. Waiting for me to fold, to panic, to fall back into the role they'd carved into me since I was 16, Fix it, Isabella. Be useful. I didn't go into the office. I couldn't. My laptop sat open on the counter, emails piling up, Slack notifications pinging, but my brain was somewhere else, down in a dark basement where every emergency phone call from my mother was stacked like boxes labeled lies. I needed answers, and I knew my family would never give them willingly. That's when I thought of Natalie Hoffman. Natalie was a friend from a networking event 3 years earlier. Sharp, composed, the kind of attorney who didn't blink when people tried to emotionally steamroll her. She worked 2 blocks from my office in a firm that specialized in financial disputes, contracts, and messy family stuff no one talked about in polite company. I texted her with fingers that still wouldn't stop shaking. Emergency. Need legal advice. ASAP. Can I see you tonight? Her reply came in under 2 minutes. My office. 7. I'll order Thai. Bring whatever access you have. By 7:15 p.m., I was sitting across from her desk, the Austin skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like nothing in the world had changed. Natalie looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Okay, start from the beginning. So I did. The prom demand, the threats, the coordinated guilt, the 4 years of help, the new $6,500 transfer. And as I spoke, I felt something else rising beneath the anger. Something colder. Shame. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd been so faithful to people who saw me as a resource, not a daughter. Natalie didn't react like my friends usually did when I mentioned my family. No awkward sympathy. No, but they're your parents. Her face just hardened. Professionally. Log in, she said. Let's see the full account history. I pulled up the Wells Fargo portal on her laptop. My stomach clenched as the dashboard loaded. It felt like walking into a room I'd been paying for years without ever stepping inside. Natalie's fingers moved quickly, pulling statements, expanding transaction histories, drilling down into categories. At first, it looked like what I expected. Utility payments, some grocery stores, gas stations. Then she scrolled, and my throat tightened. Isabella, she said carefully, I'm seeing payments to multiple credit card companies. I leaned in. Credit cards? Capital One, Chase, Discover. She clicked again, her eyebrows drawing together. And retailers. Luxury retailers. I blinked, not understanding. That's not possible. This account was supposed to be for necessities. Natalie's mouth tightened like she'd heard this exact sentence 100 times from other clients who loved people who didn't deserve it. She kept scrolling. There it was. Nordstrom, Sephora, Free People, a jewelry store, a travel agency. My vision blurred at the edges. Sophia, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant my sister or the life she'd been living on my back. Natalie clicked into another section. And here, she pointed at the screen, this is a mortgage payment, but it's not labeled as their primary mortgage. I swallowed. What does it say? Second lien, she looked up. Second mortgage. The words landed like a punch to the sternum. A second mortgage. My parents had told me for years their house was almost paid off. They'd told me they just needed help here and there. They'd made me feel guilty for having a stable life, for not sharing enough, for not remembering where I came from. And all along, they were stacking debt like kindling. Natalie scrolled again, then she stopped. 3 weeks ago, she said, voice flat, there's a $3,500 payment to Premium Prom Designs. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. Prom? I choked. She turned the laptop slightly so I could see it clearly. Premium Prom Designs, $3,500. So Sophia's $3,200 demand wasn't even the first prom expense. It was the next installment. They'd already been spending, already assuming the money would keep flowing like it always had. And now, with a $6,500 transfer hitting the account the morning after the ultimatum, it wasn't hard to imagine why they'd suddenly gone nuclear. They weren't threatening to disown me over a dress. They were terrified I'd finally look too closely. Natalie sat back. How long has this account been active? 4 years, I said, voice hollow. She tapped at her calculator, then pulled up a spreadsheet. Minutes passed in heavy silence while she totaled the withdrawals. Each click felt like a shovel digging deeper into something I didn't want to name. Finally, she looked up. Isabella, over the past 4 years, there have been withdrawals totaling approximately $127,000. I felt the number in my bones. $127,000. 2 years of student loan payments, a down payment on a home, a future I'd been building while my parents quietly set fire to it to keep Sophia warm. Natalie's voice softened but didn't sugarcoat, and based on the patterns here, credit card payments, the second mortgage, the frequency of these transactions, your parents are carrying significant additional debt beyond what you've funded. I stared at the screen, numb. How much? I whispered. Natalie hesitated, then answered with careful honesty. I'd estimate they're leveraged for at least $500,000, possibly more. $500,000. And suddenly, every rough month phone call I'd ever received rewound in my head with a new soundtrack. Not desperation. Strategy. My throat burned. What do I do? I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. Natalie didn't hesitate. First thing tomorrow, she said, eyes steady on mine, you close that joint account immediately. I stared at her, my pulse roaring, because even now, knowing what I knew, there was a part of me that wanted to hesitate, a part that still feared my mother's tears, my father's disappointment, Sophia's rage. And Natalie read that war on my face like she'd been trained for it. They've been using you as a pressure valve, she said. If you don't shut it off, they will drain you until there's nothing left. I swallowed hard. Outside, the city lights kept blinking like normal. Inside, something in me shifted. A line. A boundary. A door that was about to slam shut. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow, I stopped being their bank. Thursday morning arrived with a strange, crystalline calm. The kind that comes right before a storm. Or right after you finally decided you're done surviving it. I woke up at 6 a.m., made coffee, and spread the printed transaction history Natalie had given me across my kitchen table. The pages looked sterile, harmless, black ink on white paper, but they felt like evidence in a trial where I was both the victim and the witness. $127,000. I traced the number with my finger. 4 years of help. 4 years of believing I was the good daughter. 4 years of being their emergency fund, their insurance policy, their emotional hostage. By 8:02 a.m., I was on the phone with Wells Fargo. I need to close a joint account immediately, I said. My voice didn't shake. The representative asked security questions. Date of birth, social security verification, mother's maiden name. The irony almost made me laugh. Every answer felt like I was cutting one more invisible thread. There is currently a pending large transfer, she said carefully. Would you like to dispute it? Yes, I replied without hesitation, immediately. The $6,500 was flagged for investigation. The account closure paperwork was initiated. This will be effective immediately, she confirmed. Remaining funds will transfer to your personal account within 48 hours. When the call ended, I sat in the silence of my apartment and waited for the guilt to crash over me. It didn't. What came instead was something almost unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for their next crisis. I wasn't budgeting my own future around their instability. I wasn't checking my phone every hour. I was free. And they didn't even know it yet. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email. Not a text, not a phone call. I wasn't giving them space to interrupt, to cry, to twist my words until I doubted my own reality. Just facts. Subject. The truth. Mom, Dad, Sophia, the joint family account is closed as of this morning. I know about the $127,000. I know about the second mortgage. I know about the credit card payments, the luxury purchases, the prom planner, and the $6,500 withdrawal. I created that account to help with necessities, bills, groceries, emergencies. Instead, you used it to fund debt and luxury spending while lying to me for 4 years. There will be no more money. No more emergency transfers. No more manipulation disguised as family loyalty. You are adults. Figure it out. Isabella. My finger hovered over send for a long second. Then I clicked. The email disappeared into cyberspace. And so did the version of me who would have apologized for setting boundaries. It took exactly 32 minutes for the fallout to begin. Sophia called first. Her voice was no longer entitled. It was panicked. "You can't do this," she shouted. "We need that account. My prom appointment is tomorrow." "Then cancel it," I said evenly. "You're tearing this family apart over money." I closed my eyes. "No," I replied quietly. "You tore it apart when you treated me like an ATM." "You're selfish," she screamed. "You make 6 figures. You don't even need it." The audacity almost made me laugh. I needed it enough not to give away $127,000. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "You've always been jealous of me," she spat. "You can't stand that Mom and Dad love me more." There it was. The truth no one ever said out loud. I felt something inside me settle. "I'm not jealous," I said calmly. "I'm done being used." And I hung up. 5 minutes later, my mother's texts began flooding in, all caps. "How dare you accuse us? We were struggling. You have no idea what we sacrificed for you. You owe us after everything we've done." The words blurred together into one familiar script. Sacrifice, obligation, guilt. I read them without responding, because now I had numbers, and numbers don't cry. My father called next. His voice was softer, controlled, strategic. "Isabella," he began, like we were discussing weather. "You're overreacting. We were under pressure. Debt piles up. Life happens." $500,000 of life? I asked. He went quiet. "You don't understand the full picture," he tried. "I understand enough. You're abandoning your family." The words stung more than I expected. Abandoning. As if they hadn't been slowly draining me for years. "I'm not abandoning you," I said quietly. "I'm refusing to enable you." There was a long pause. Then his voice hardened. "You'll regret this, maybe, but not as much as I'd regret staying." I hung up. My phone didn't stop vibrating for the next hour. Voicemails, texts, FaceTime requests. "Sophia, Mom is crying because of you. Mom, we raised you better than this. Dad, call us and we'll talk like adults." Adults. The word almost made me smile. Adults don't threaten to disown their daughter over a prom dress. Adults don't hide second mortgages. Adults don't siphon $127,000 while preaching family loyalty. At 11:47 a.m., I blocked all 3 of their numbers. It felt brutal. Final. Necessary. Then I created an email filter that sent their messages directly into a folder labeled Archive, not deleted. Just out of sight. The silence that followed was deafening. And then, strangely, peaceful. That evening, I called Natalie. "They're losing it," I said. "Of course they are," she replied. "Their safety net disappeared overnight." Part of me still felt the tug of guilt. "What if they lose the house?" I asked quietly. Natalie didn't hesitate. "They were already losing it. You were just delaying the inevitable." Her words landed gently, firm, but kind. "You didn't create their debt, Isabella. You just stopped financing it." That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. No 2 a.m. anxiety spikes. No checking my bank balance in a panic. No rehearsing imaginary arguments in my head. Just silence. And for the first time in years, I realized something. I wasn't responsible for their survival. They were. But a week later, I made a decision I hadn't expected. I needed to see them, not to apologize, not to reconcile, but to look them in the eye and remove any illusion that this was a misunderstanding. I needed closure. Saturday afternoon, I drove to their house in the Austin suburbs. The same 2-story colonial, the same patchy lawn, the same crooked American flag my father refused to fix. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The folder of bank statements rested on the passenger seat. Evidence. Truth. Armor. I stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. My mother opened it before I knocked. Her face was already tight with fury. "So you finally decided to show up?" I didn't answer. I walked inside. My father stood in the living room, arms crossed. Sophia was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to care. I dropped the folder on the coffee table. "I know everything," I said, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The sound of the folder hitting the coffee table echoed louder than it should have. Or maybe it was just that my pulse was pounding so hard it amplified everything. My mother folded her arms immediately, defensive, indignant, already offended. "I know everything," I repeated, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. My father didn't move. He just watched. Sophia barely looked up from her phone. I opened the folder and began laying out the documents one by one across the glass table, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Bank statements, transaction histories, credit card payments, the second mortgage filing, the $3,500 payment to Premium Prom Designs, the $6,500 transfer, paper by paper, proof by proof. "You took $127,000 from the account I set up to help you," I said. "Over 4 years." My mother's face flushed instantly. "How dare you dig into our private finances?" she snapped. "This is family. You had no right." I let out a short, incredulous breath. "No right?" I said. "It was my money." My father finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "We never forced you to send it." That one stung. "No," I said slowly. "You just told me the mortgage was late, that utilities were about to be shut off, that medical bills were piling up. You implied disaster every single time." "That wasn't a lie," my mother shot back. "We were struggling." "With Nordstrom?" I asked. "With Sephora? With Cancun?" Sophia's head snapped up. "You're spying on us now?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. The girl who'd grown up believing she deserved everything. The girl who thought $3,200 for prom was a birthright. "You've been living off my money for years," I said quietly. "Did you know that?" She rolled her eyes. "I didn't ask you to send it." The audacity hit like a slap. "You benefited from it," I replied. "Every trip, every shopping spree. That boutique appointment you had planned, that was already funded with my money." Her cheeks flushed pink. My father stepped forward, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Isabella," he said, "you don't understand the position we were in. Debt piles up. We had to maintain stability. Appearances matter." "Appearances?" I repeated. My voice rose before I could stop it. "You took out a second mortgage." Silence fell heavy across the room. Sophia looked confused for half a second. "A what?" My mother shot my father a sharp look. "You told her?" she hissed. "No," he muttered. I held up the printed statement. "You leveraged the house, and you never told me. Instead, you kept calling me every time you needed to plug a hole." "We were trying to protect you," my mother insisted. "From what?" I demanded. "The truth?" Her expression shifted. Tears pooled instantly in her eyes, but they felt rehearsed, weaponized. "We sacrificed everything for you girls," she said, voice trembling dramatically. "You think raising you was free? You think we didn't struggle?" "Struggle?" I stared at her. "You told me at 16 that there wasn't money for my school trip. You told me to figure it out. I did. I worked 2 jobs through college. I paid my own tuition." "That made you stronger," she snapped. "And what did this make her?" I shot back, gesturing toward Sophia. Sophia stood abruptly. "Why are you attacking me? I'm just going to prom." "This isn't about prom," I said, my voice dropping lower, steadier. "It's about 4 years of lies." My father's patience snapped. "You're being dramatic. It was a family arrangement. You help, we all survive." "Survive?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You spent $3,500 at a prom boutique 3 weeks ago." Sophia froze. "What?" she whispered. My mother's lips tightened. "We were going to tell you," she said weakly. "When?" I asked. after you threatened to disown me?" The room exploded. "You're ungrateful," my mother shouted. "You've always thought you were better than us," Sophia yelled. "You're tearing this family apart," my father roared. Their voices overlapped, crashing into each other in a storm of blame. And suddenly, in the middle of it, I felt calm. Not angry, not hurt, just clear, because none of them had said the one thing that mattered. None of them had said sorry. Instead, they defended the theft, defended the manipulation, defended the entitlement. I gathered the papers slowly. "This is over," I said. My mother gasped, like I'd announced a death. "You can't just walk away." "I already did," I replied. "You owe us," she cried. I stopped at the doorway and turned back. "No," I said softly. "I don't." For a moment, something flickered across my father's face. Not anger, not arrogance, fear. Because without me, their house of cards had no foundation. Sophia's voice cut through the silence. "You're ruining my life over money." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something beneath the anger. Panic. Because for the first time, she might have to figure something out on her own. "You'll survive," I said. And I meant it. I stepped outside. The air felt different, lighter. Behind me, my mother was crying loudly. My father was pacing. Sophia was shouting something about canceling appointments. I got into my car and locked the doors. For a second, my hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. My father stood in the doorway, staring at me like I was something he didn't recognize anymore. Maybe I was. I put the car in reverse and drove away. Not fast, not dramatically, just forward. And as the house disappeared behind me, I realized something profound. I didn't feel regret. I felt free. But freedom has consequences, and 3 months later, they would finally arrive. The silence after the confrontation was louder than any screaming match. For weeks, my phone stayed quiet. No midnight emergencies, no guilt-laced voicemails, no dramatic ultimatums. At first, the absence felt unnatural, like I'd stepped out of a loud room and my ears were still ringing. Then the ringing faded, and underneath it, there was something else. Peace. I threw myself into work. Back-to-back meetings, campaign launches, a new client acquisition that kept me at the office past sunset 3 nights in a row. But in the quiet moments, in the elevator, in traffic, brushing my teeth, I replayed that afternoon. The tears, the shouting, the complete absence of remorse. Not once had they apologized. Not once had they admitted they were wrong. 3 months passed. Then my phone buzzed on a Sunday afternoon while I was reorganizing my closet. It was my cousin Daniel, the only relative who never seemed fully swallowed by the family's drama. "Hey, just a heads up. Aunt Diana and Uncle Robert filed for bankruptcy last week. Heard they're losing the house." I stared at the message for a long time. My chest tightened. Not with panic, not even with anger, with something quieter. A small, stubborn sadness. That house had held my childhood. The kitchen where I did homework alone. The bedroom where I cried quietly at 16 when my mother told me to figure it out. But it had also held years of manipulation. Daniel sent another text. Also, Sophia got a job at Forever 21 at the mall. Apparently, she's not thrilled. I let out a slow breath. Sophia, the girl who once declared that retail jobs were for people with no ambition, now folding graphic tees for $12 an hour. A strange mix of emotions swirled in my chest. Not triumph, not revenge, just inevitability. This was always going to happen. I had just stopped delaying it. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and let the reality settle in. Bankruptcy, foreclosure, retail job. The collapse had finally arrived, and I hadn't caused it. They had. That distinction mattered. The following week, I scheduled my first therapy appointment. I told myself it was just to process stress. But when I sat across from Dr. Patricia Wong, her calm eyes and steady posture made it impossible to hide behind that excuse. "So," she said gently, Tell me what brings you here. I expected to talk about money. Instead, I started talking about being 16, about being told I was mature enough to handle things on my own, about watching my sister receive everything I was denied, about wiring thousands of dollars because I thought love required sacrifice. Dr. Wong listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands thoughtfully. What you're describing, she said carefully, is financial abuse. The word landed heavily. Abuse. I opened my mouth to object. They're my parents, I said automatically. Yes, she nodded. And they conditioned you to believe your value came from what you could provide. I went quiet. You were trained, she continued, to feel guilty for having boundaries, to equate saying no with betrayal. Something inside me cracked, because that was exactly what it felt like. Betrayal. Even now, knowing the truth, there were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd been too harsh, if I should have helped just a little longer. If you had continued, Dr. Wong asked softly, what would have changed? I pictured more transfers, more lies, more debt. Nothing would have changed, except me. I would have disappeared. You didn't abandon them, she said. You stopped enabling them. Enabling. Another word that reframed everything. For years, I believed I was saving my family. In reality, I was shielding them from consequences. Consequences are painful, but they teach. Enabling only prolongs the lesson. Over the next few months, therapy became a ritual. Every Thursday at 6 p.m., we untangled childhood moments I had buried. The time my mother said, "The Nessa is our chance to get parenting right." The way my father praised Sophia's every minor achievement, but barely acknowledged my college graduation. The joint account I created, not out of generosity, but out of a desperate need to feel needed. You were the responsible one, Dr. Wong said during one session. Responsible children often become responsible adults who overfunction for everyone else. Overfunction. That word fit, too. I'd been overfunctioning my entire life. Fixing. Providing, anticipating, never resting. Meanwhile, Daniel sent another update around month 4. House officially on the market. Bank took possession. I read it without reacting. Then came another. Sophia posted on Instagram about adulting being harder than it looks. That one made me pause. Later, curiosity got the better of me. I unblocked her profile, just long enough to look. There she was. Standing behind a mall counter, wearing a Forever 21 lanyard. Caption, Day 97 of adulting. It's harder than it looks, followed by a laughing emoji. The comments were full of support from friends. You got this. Retail is brutal, LOL. We all start somewhere. There was no entitlement in her smile, no smugness, just exhaustion. For a fleeting moment, I felt something close to compassion. Maybe she was learning. Maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. That was the hardest lesson. To watch without intervening. To feel empathy without stepping in to rescue. Dr. Wong called it detached compassion. You can care about someone, she explained, without sacrificing yourself for them. That idea rewired something fundamental inside me, because my entire identity had been built around being the fixer. Now I was learning how to be just me. Financially, the shift was immediate. The $2,600 per month I'd been sending to the joint account stayed in my own. Within 6 months, my emergency fund was fully rebuilt. Within 9, my investment portfolio looked stronger than it ever had. I started researching condos. Something with sunlight. Something that was mine. Not tied to obligation. Not haunted by guilt. One evening, as I reviewed listings online, I realized something profound. For the first time since I was 16, I wasn't bracing for a family crisis. I wasn't budgeting for someone else's irresponsibility. I wasn't living in survival mode. The collapse had happened. The house was gone. The illusion was gone. And somehow, so was the weight on my chest. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as silence. And I was finally beginning to understand how to live inside it. But healing wasn't just about money. It was about learning how to let someone in without becoming their safety net. And that lesson was coming sooner than I expected. 6 months after the bankruptcy, I signed the papers for my condo, South Austin, 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a narrow balcony overlooking the lake where kayaks drifted lazily at sunset. When the realtor handed me the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room and let the quiet settle around me. No family drama, no debt collectors, no guilt, just possibility. I walked from room to room, sunlight stretching across bare hardwood floors, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Not the desperate kind that seeks validation, the quiet kind, the earned kind. That night, I ordered takeout, sat cross-legged on the floor, and stared at the city lights reflecting off the water. The $127,000 was gone, but I wasn't. And somehow, that mattered more. Therapy continued every Thursday. We shifted from crisis management to reconstruction. "What does a boundary look like for you now?" Dr. Wong asked one evening. I thought about it. "It looks like not explaining myself endlessly," I said slowly. "It looks like saying no without a speech." She smiled. "Good," because that had always been my weakness. Over-explaining, over-justifying, over-functioning. Even at work, even in friendships. If someone needed help, I jumped. If someone was overwhelmed, I absorbed it. If someone disappointed me, I rationalized it. I was fluent in self-sacrifice. Now I was learning restraint. And then I met him. It happened in the most unremarkable way possible. A networking event downtown, the kind I'd attended dozens of times before. I almost didn't go. But I'd promised myself something after the condo closed. Build a life that isn't centered on damage control. So I went. And there he was. Ethan Cole, 36, architect. Calm in a way that didn't feel performative. He wasn't flashy, didn't dominate the room, didn't oversell himself. When he spoke, it was measured, intentional. We ended up standing near the same table during a conversation about sustainable design. "You look like you disagree," he said lightly, after I raised an eyebrow at something a panelist said. I blinked, surprised. "Maybe I do." He smiled, not challenging, not defensive. "Tell me why." And he listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, not trying to correct me, just listening. That alone felt radical. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night. I didn't expect much, but he texted the next morning. "Coffee this weekend?" Simple, direct, no games. On our first date, I braced myself without meaning to, for ego, for subtle condescension, for the unspoken expectation that I'd shrink. It never came. Instead, he asked questions about my work, about my condo, about why I chose Austin. And when I hesitated before answering something personal, he didn't push. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to," he said gently. The sentence lingered, because in my family, privacy was betrayal. With him, privacy was respected. A few weeks into dating, he mentioned his ex. "She moved to Chicago last year," he said casually. It ended because we wanted different things. No bitterness, no victim narrative, no lingering drama, just fact. The absence of chaos unsettled me at first. I kept waiting for the catch, the crisis, the hidden flaw. Instead, there were small consistencies. He showed up when he said he would. He paid attention. He didn't ask for money. He didn't hint at support. When I finally told him about my family, not everything, but enough, he didn't flinch. "That must have been brutal," he said quietly. I waited for advice, for judgment, for some version of, "But they're still your parents." It never came. "Do you talk to them now?" he asked. "No." He nodded once. "Then that's probably what you need. No drama, no pressure, just acceptance." And something inside me loosened. For the first time, I wasn't auditioning for love. I wasn't earning it through usefulness. I was just present. Meanwhile, my finances stabilized into something solid and intentional. The $2,600 I used to send my parents each month now flowed into investments. My emergency fund grew. My retirement account strengthened. My condo equity slowly increased. Each deposit felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But healing isn't linear. There were nights, especially around holidays, when the guilt crept in. When I imagined my mother sitting at a smaller dining table, my father scrolling job listings in quiet frustration, Sophia closing the mall at 9 p.m. Guilt doesn't mean you're wrong, Dr. Wong reminded me once. It means you were conditioned to believe my survival required their approval. But now my survival required boundaries. One evening, about a year after the confrontation, Ethan and I stood on my balcony watching a thunderstorm roll in across the lake. Lightning split the sky. He slipped his hand into mine without comment. No grand declarations, no urgency, just steady warmth. "I'm glad you chose yourself," he said quietly. The words caught me off guard. "Why?" I asked. "Because if you hadn't," he replied, "you wouldn't be standing here." He was right. If I'd kept funding the collapse, I would still be drowning in it. Instead, I was rebuilding, brick by brick, emotion by emotion. And somewhere between therapy sessions and sunset storms, I realized something profound. Boundaries don't just protect you from harm. They create space for something healthier to enter. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that space. I was learning how to live in it. But growth has a strange way of circling back. And 18 months after I drove away from that suburban house, my sister would reappear in the most unexpected way. 18 months after the day I walked out of my parents' house for the last time, Sophia's name appeared on my phone again. Not as a call, not as a voicemail, as a notification. Instagram. For a split second, my stomach tightened the way it used to, like my body still remembered the sound of chaos before my brain could catch up. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. She had sent a message request. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. No insults, no accusations, no demands, just 3 words. "Can we talk?" That was it. No dramatic preamble, no emotional manipulation. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen, letting the message sit there like something fragile. Ethan was at the counter, flipping through architectural sketches. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my expression. "It's Sophia," I said. He didn't tense, didn't react like this was a threat. What does she want? Just to talk. He nodded once. "Do you want to?" That question mattered more than the message. Did I want to? Not because I felt obligated, not because I felt guilty, but because I genuinely wanted to. I thought about the Instagram photo Daniel had mentioned months ago, the Forever 21 lanyard, the tired smile. I thought about the collapse, about consequences, about learning. "I don't know," I admitted. Ethan stepped closer, resting his hands lightly on the counter. "Whatever you decide," he said calmly, "make sure it's about you, not about who you used to be." That night, I didn't respond. The next morning, Sophia sent another message. "I'm not asking for money. I just need to clear something up." The second sentence hit differently. Not asking for money. The fact that she had to clarify that said everything. I replied with 2 words. "Call me tonight." At 7:12 p.m., my phone rang. Her voice sounded different, quieter. "Hi," she said awkwardly. "Hi." There was a long pause. "I'm not calling to fight," she blurted. "I know." Another silence. Then she exhaled slowly. "I didn't know about the second mortgage." I closed my eyes. "I figured." "They didn't tell me how bad it was," she continued. "I thought you just didn't want to help." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't understand what they were doing." I leaned against the couch, steady. "They were protecting you from the consequences," I said gently. "Yeah," she whispered. "And now I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment with Mom." That was new. "What about Dad?" "He's staying with a friend. They're not great." I absorbed that quietly. For years, my parents had presented a united front. Now the cracks were visible. "I'm working full-time now," Sophia added quickly, almost defensively. "I transferred to a different store, assistant manager." I felt a small, unexpected flicker of pride. "That's good," I said honestly. Another pause. Then, "I was horrible to you," she said suddenly. The words landed softly. No dramatics, No excuses. Just fact. I was, she repeated. I thought you owed me. I thought that was just how it worked. I swallowed. I let it work that way, I admitted. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't hostile. It was reflective. They don't talk about you, she said after a moment. Not really. Mom says you betrayed us. Dad just gets quiet. And you? I asked. She hesitated. I think you saved yourself. The simplicity of that sentence caught me off guard. Saved yourself. Not ruined us. Not abandoned us. Saved yourself. I had to, I said quietly. I know. We talked for another 20 minutes. About work. About therapy. Yes, she'd started going too. About how hard rent is when you actually earn it. Not once did she ask for money. Not once did she imply I owed her anything. When we hung up, I felt lighter, not reconciled, not restored. Just less tense. Ethan looked up from the couch. How did it go? She apologized, I said, almost surprised by the word. He smiled softly. That's growth. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just survival. Over the next few weeks, Sophia and I exchanged occasional texts. Surface level. Careful. I didn't reopen the door completely. Boundaries still existed, but the hostility was gone. One afternoon, she sent me a photo. Her in a blazer, standing in front of a whiteboard. Got promoted to store manager. I stared at it for a long moment. She looked older. Not in years. In experience. Proud of you, I replied. It felt genuine. Because pride didn't have to mean permission. I didn't resume financial support. I didn't offer advice unless she asked. I didn't try to fix anything. And that was the difference. This time, I wasn't overfunctioning. I was just her sister. At a distance. Dr. Wong called it measured reconnection. You can rebuild pieces, she said, without rebuilding the whole structure. That felt right. My parents never reached out directly. No apologies. No accountability. And I no longer needed one. 2 years ago, their silence would have eaten me alive. Now, it was just space. Necessary space. One evening, as Ethan and I walked along the lake at sunset, he glanced at me thoughtfully. You're different lately, he said. Different how? Lighter. I considered that. Maybe he was right. For years, I carried the weight of being the responsible one, the fixer, the provider, the emotional adult. Now, I was just Isabella, a woman with a condo, a stable career, a healthy relationship, a sister who might finally be growing up. In a family dynamic I no longer felt responsible for holding together. Growth isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive with grand speeches. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in apologies that don't demand forgiveness, in boundaries that don't require explanation, in choosing not to rescue someone who is learning how to swim. But closure came somewhere deeper. And it arrived exactly 2 years after that prom text changed everything. 2 years after the prom text that detonated my life. I stood on my balcony watching the same lake shimmer beneath a late summer sky. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of rain. Inside, my condo felt lived in now. Plants thriving near the windows, framed photos on the walls, Ethan's jacket draped over the back of a chair like it belonged there. Because it did. So did he. He stepped outside beside me, resting his elbows on the railing. You're thinking, he said lightly. I am. About them? I nodded once. Not with bitterness, not with longing. Just reflection. 2 years. It felt longer. And shorter. So much had shifted in that time. My career had accelerated in ways I never imagined at 22, when I was working double shifts at Starbucks and eating instant noodles in a studio apartment. 3 months ago, I'd been promoted again, senior project director. The salary increase had been significant, not because I needed to send money anywhere anymore, but because I finally understood how to build wealth without fear it would vanish into someone else's poor decisions. My emergency fund was solid, my investments steady, my condo nearly 20% higher in value than when I bought it. But the real growth wasn't financial. It was internal. I no longer flinched when my phone buzzed. I no longer felt responsible for everyone else's survival. I no longer equated sacrifice with love. Sophia and I had settled into something that resembled cautious adulthood. Occasional coffee, careful conversations, no financial entanglements. She paid her own bills now, managed her own rent, talked openly about therapy. Our parents remained distant figures. My mother occasionally posted dramatic quotes on Facebook about loyalty and betrayal. My father disappeared mostly into silence. They never apologized. And for the first time, I didn't need them to, because closure didn't come from their accountability. It came from my boundary. I turned to Ethan. "Do you ever feel guilty for choosing yourself?" I asked quietly. He considered it. "Not if choosing myself doesn't harm anyone," he said. "And protecting yourself from harm isn't the same as causing it." That distinction had taken me 34 years to learn. 34 years of overfunctioning, of earning approval, of confusing obligation with love. The storm clouds rolled slowly across the horizon, lightning flickering faintly in the distance. I remembered that Tuesday morning in the conference room. The $3,200 text. The ultimatum, family or selfishness. At the time, it felt like a threat. Now it felt like a test I had finally passed. Because the truth was simple. You can't save people who don't want to save themselves. You can't fund responsibility into someone who refuses to learn it. And you cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Not even if they share your DNA. For years, I believed being a good daughter meant absorbing chaos. Now I understood something different. Being a healthy adult meant refusing it. Ethan squeezed my hand gently. "You don't carry it anymore," he said softly. He was right. The weight I once carried like a duty had dissolved into memory. Sometimes when I think back to that suburban house, the crooked flagpole, the dying lawn, I feel a flicker of nostalgia, but it's not for what was. It's for what I thought it was. A family that valued me. A home built on trust. That illusion collapsed the same way their finances did. Slowly. Then all at once. And in the rubble, I found something stronger. Self-respect. Financial clarity, emotional boundaries, a partnership built on equality instead of obligation. Sophia texted me earlier that week. Got approved for my own apartment, no cosigner. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I smiled. That's huge. Proud of you. Growth doesn't erase the past, but it reshapes the future. If someone had told me 2 years ago that losing my family's approval would lead to this version of my life, I wouldn't have believed them. Because back then, I equated family with identity. Now I understand something different. Family is not a contract that grants unlimited access to your resources. Love is not measured in wire transfers. Loyalty does not require self-destruction. I leaned into Ethan's shoulder, watching the first drops of rain hit the water below. I chose freedom, I said quietly. He kissed my temple. You chose survival. Maybe that's what it was all along. Survival disguised as selfishness. Protection mistaken for betrayal. Boundaries mislabeled as cruelty. But here's what I know now. The moment I closed that joint account wasn't the moment I lost my family. It was the moment I stopped losing myself. And I've never looked back.